clear appeal, she struck a happy tear away and broke the crimson seal. My love, there is no help on earth, no help in heaven, the dead man's bell must toll our wedding, our first hearth must be the well-paved floor of hell. The colour died from out her face, her eyes like ghostly candles shone. She cast dread looks about the place and clenched her teeth and read right on. I may not pass the prison door, here must I rot from day to day, unless I wed whom I abhor, my cousin Blanche of Valençay. At midnight with my dagger keen I'll take my life, it must be so. Meet me in hell tonight, my queen, for weal and woe. She laughed, although her face was wan. She girded on her golden belt, she took her jewelled ivory fan, and at her glowing missal knelt. Then rose. Am I mad? She said. She broke her fan, her belt untied, with leather girt herself instead, and stuck a dagger at her side. She waited, shuddering in her room, till sleep had fallen on all the house. She never flinched, she faced her doom. They too must sin to keep their vows. Then out into the night she went, and stooping crept by hedge and tree. Her rosebush flung a snare of scent and caught a happy memory. She fell and lay a minute's pace, she tore the sward in her distress. The dewy grass refreshed her face, she rose and ran with lifted dress. She started like a morn-caught ghost once when the moon came out and stood to watch. The naked road she crossed and dived into the murmuring wood. The branches snatched her streaming cloak, a live thing shrieked, she made no stay. She hurried to the trysting oak, right well she knew the way. Without a pause she bared her breast and drove her dagger home, and fell, and lay like one that takes her rest, and died, and wakened up in hell. She bathed her spirit in the flame, and near the centre took her post. From all sides to her ears there came the dreary anguish of the lost. The devil started at her side, comely and tall and black as jet. I am young Melespina's bride. Has he come hither yet? My moppet, welcome to your bed. Is Melespina here? Not he. Tomorrow he must wed his cousin Blanche, my dear. You lie! He died with me tonight. Not he, it was a plot. You lie! My dear, I never lie outright. We died at midnight, he and I. The devil went. Without a groan she gathered up in one fierce prayer, took root in hell's midst all alone, and waited for him there. She dared to make herself at home amidst the wail, the uneasy stir, the blood-stained flame that filled the dome, scentless and silent, shrouded her. How long she stayed I cannot tell, but when she felt his perfidy, she marched across the floor of hell, and all the damned stood up to see. The devil stopped her at the brink. She shook him off and cried, "Away! My dear, you have gone mad, I think. I was betrayed. I will not stay." Across the weltering deep she ran. A stranger thing was never seen. The damned stood silent to a man. They saw the great gulf set between. To her it seemed a meadow fair, and flowers sprang up about her feet. She entered heaven. She climbed the stair and knelt down at the mercy seat. Seraphs and saints with one great voice welcomed that soul that knew no fear. Amazed to find it could rejoice, hell raised a hoarse, half-human cheer. It was the hour of the night when there be none stirring save churchyard ghosts, when all doors are closed except the gates of graves, and all eyes shut but the eyes of wicked men, when there is no sound on the earth except the ticking of the grasshopper or the croaking of obscene frogs in the pool. and no light except that of the blinking stars and the wicked and devilish wills of the wisp, as they gamble among the marshes and lead good men astray. When there is nothing moving in heaven except the owl as he flappeth along lazily, or the magician as he rideth on his infernal broomstick, whistling through the air like the arrows of a Yorkshire archer. It was at this hour, namely at 12 o'clock of the night, that two beings were winging through the black clouds and holding converse with each other. Now the first was Mercurius, the messenger not of gods, as the heathens feigned, but of demons, and the second with whom he held company was the soul of Sir Roger de Rollo, the brave knight. Sir Roger was Count of Chauchigny in Champagne, Seigneur of Santerre, Villassères, et autres lieux. But the great die as well as the humble, and nothing remained of brave Roger now but his coffin and his deathless soul. And Mercurius, in order to keep fast the soul, his companion, had bound him round the neck with his tail, which, when the soul was stubborn, he would draw so tight as to strangle him well nigh, sticking into him the barbed point thereof, whereat the poor soul, Sir Rollo, would groan and roar lustily. Now they two had come together from the gates of purgatory, being bound to those regions of fire and flame where poor sinners fry and roast in secula seculorum. "It is hard," said poor Sir Rollo, as they went gliding through the clouds, "that I should thus be condemned for ever, and all for want of a single ave." "How, Sir Soul," said the demon, "you were on earth so wicked that not one or a million of aves could suffice to keep from hell-flame a creature like thee, but cheer up and be merry. Thou wilt be but a subject of our lord the devil, as am I, and perhaps thou wilt be advanced to posts of honour, as am I also." And to show his authority, he lashed with his tail the ribs of the wretched Rollo. "Nevertheless, sinner as I am, one more ave would have saved me. For my sister, who was abbess of St. Mary of Chauchigny, did so prevail by her prayer and good works for my lost and wretched soul, that every day I felt the pains of purgatory decrease. The pitchforks which, on my first entry, had never ceased to vex and torment my poor carcass, were now not applied above once a week. The roasting had ceased, the boiling had discontinued, only a certain warmth was kept up to remind me of my situation." "A gentle stew," said the demon. "Yea, truly, I was but in a stew, and all from the effects of the prayers of my blessed sister. But yesterday he who watched me in purgatory told me that yet another prayer from my sister and my bonds should be unloosed, and I, who am now a devil, should have been a blessed angel." "And the other ave?" said the demon. "She died, sir. My sister died. Death choked her in the middle of the prayer." And hereat the wretched spirit began to weep and whine piteously, his salt tears falling over his beard and scalding the tail of Mercurius the devil. "'Tis in truth a hard case," said the demon, "but I know of no remedy save patience, and for that you will have an excellent opportunity in your lodgings below." "But I have relations," said the earl. "My kinsman Randall, who has inherited my lands, will he not say a prayer for his uncle?" "Thou didst hate and oppress him when living." "Oh, 'tis true, but an ave is not much. His sister, my niece Matilda." "You shut her in a convent and hanged her lover." "Had I not reason? Besides, has she not others?" "A dozen, without a doubt." And my brother, the prior?" "A liege subject of my lord, the devil. He never opens his mouth except to utter an oath or to swallow a cup of wine." "And yet if but one of these would but say an ave for me, I should be saved." "Aves with them are rare aves," replied Mercurius, wagging his tail right waggishly. "And what is more, I will lay thee any wager that not one of these will say a prayer to save thee." "I would wager willingly," responded he of Chauchigny. But what has a poor soul like me to stake? Every evening after the days of roasting, my lord Satan giveth a cup of cold water to his servants. I will bet thee thy water for a year that none of the three will pray for thee. Done, said Rollo. Done, said the demon. And here, if I mistake not, is thy castle of Chauchigny. Indeed, it was true. The soul, on looking down, perceived the tall towers, the courts, the stables, and the fair gardens of the castle. Although it was past midnight, there was a blaze of light in the banqueting hall, and a lamp burning in the open window of the Lady Matilda. With whom shall we begin? Said the demon. With the baron or the lady? With the lady, if you will. Be it so. Her window is open. Let us enter. So they descended and entered silently into Matilda's chamber. The young lady's eyes were fixed so intently on a little clock that it was no wonder that she did not perceive the entrance of her two visitors. Her fair cheek rested in her white arm, and her white arm on the cushion of a great chair in which she sat, pleasantly supported by sweet thoughts and swan's down. A lute was at her side, and a book of prayers lay under the table, for piety is always modest. Like the amorous Alexander, she sighed and looked at the clock, and sighed for 10 minutes or more. Then she softly breathed the word, Edward. At this the soul of the baron was wroth. The jades at her old pranks, said he to the devil, and then addressing Matilda, I pray thee, sweet niece, turn thy thoughts for a moment from that villainous page, Edward, and give them to thine affectionate uncle. When she heard the voice and saw the awful apparition of her uncle, for years sojourn in purgatory had not increased the comeliness of his appearance, she started, screamed, and of course fainted. But the devil, Mercurius, soon restored her to herself. Oh, what's o'clock? Said she, as soon as she had recovered from her fit. Is he come? Not thy lover, Maud, but thine uncle, that is, his soul. For the love of heaven, listen to me. I've been frying in purgatory for a year past, and should have been in heaven but for the want of a single Ave. Oh, I'll say it for thee tomorrow, uncle. Tonight, or never. Well, tonight be it. And she requested the devil Mercurius to give her the prayer book from under the table. But she had no sooner touched the holy book than he dropped it with a shriek, oh, ah, and a yell. It was hotter, he said, than his master, Sir Lucifer's own particular pitchfork. The lady was forced to begin her Ave without the aid of her missal. At the commencement of her devotions, the demon retired and carried with him the anxious soul of poor Sir Roger de Rollo. The lady knelt down. She sighed deeply. She looked again at the clock and began, Ave Maria, when a lute was heard under the window and a sweet voice singing. Hark, said Matilda. Now the toils of day are over, and the sun hath sunk to rest, seeking like a fiery lava the bosom of the blushing west. The faithful night keeps watch and ward, raising the moon her silver shield, and summoning the stars to guard the slumbers of my fair Matilde. For mercy's sake, said Sir Rollo, the Ave first, and then the song. So Matilda again dutifully betook her to her devotions and began Ave Maria, gratia plena. But the music began again, and the prayer ceased, of course. The faithful night now all things lie, hid by her mantle dark and dim. In pious hope I hear the high and humbly chant my evening hymn. Thou art my prayer, my saint, my shrine, for never holy pilgrim kneeled or wept at feet more pure than thine, my virgin love, my sweet Matilde. Virgin love, said the baron. Poor my soul, this is too bad. and he thought of the lady's lover whom he had caused to be hanged. But she only thought of him who stood singing at her window. "Niece Matilda," cried Sir Roger agonizedly, "wilt thou listen to the lies of an impudent page whilst thine uncle is waiting but a dozen words to make him happy?" At this Matilda grew angry. "Edward is neither impudent nor a liar, sir uncle, and I will listen to the end of the song." "Come away," said Mercurius. "He hath yet got wheeled, field, sealed, congealed, and a dozen other rhymes besides, and after the song will come the supper." So the poor soul was obliged to go, while the lady listened and the page sung away till morning. "Oh, my virtues have been my ruin," said poor Sir Rollo, as he and Mercurius slunk silently out of the window. "Had I hanged that knave Edward as I did the page his predecessor, my niece would have sung mine Ave, and I should by this time have been an angel in heaven." "He is reserved for wiser purposes," responded the devil. "He will assassinate your successor, the Lady Matilda's brother, and in consequence will be hanged. In the love of the lady he will be succeeded by a gardener, who will be replaced by a monk, who will give way to an ostler, who will be deposed by a pedlar, who shall finally yield to a noble earl, the future husband of the fair Matilde. So that, you see, instead of having one poor soul a-frying, we may now look forward to a goodly harvest for our lord the devil." The soul of the Baron began to think that his companion knew too much for one who would make fair bets, but there was no help for it. He would not and he could not cry off, and he prayed inwardly that the brother might be found more pious than the sister. But there seemed little chance of this. As they crossed the court, lackeys with smoking dishes and full jugs passed and repassed continually, or it was long past midnight. On entering the hall, they found Sir Randall at the head of a vast table, surrounded by a fiercer and more motley collection of individuals than had congregated there even in the time of Sir Rollo. The lord of the castle had signified that it was his royal pleasure to be drunk, and the gentlemen of his train had obsequiously followed their master. Mercurius was delighted with the scene, and relaxed his usually rigid countenance into a bland and benevolent smile which became him wonderfully. The entrance of Sir Roger, who had been dead about a year, and a person with hoofs, horn, and a tail, rather disturbed the hilarity of the company. Sir Randall dropped his cup of wine, and Father Peter, the confessor, paused in the midst of a profane song with which he was amusing the society. "Holy Mother!" cried he, "it's Sir Roger!" "Alive!" screamed Sir Randall. "No, my lord," Mercurius said, "Sir Roger is dead, but cometh on a matter of business, and I have the honour to act as his counsellor and attendant." "Nephew," said Sir Roger, "the demon saith justly, I am come on a trifling affair in which thy service is essential." "I'll do anything, uncle, in my power." "Thou canst give me life if thou wilt." But Sir Randall looked very blank at this proposition. I mean life spiritual, Randall," said Sir Roger, and thereupon he explained to him the nature of the wager. Whilst he was telling his story, his companion Mercurius was playing all sorts of antics in the hall, and by his wit and fun became so popular with this godless crew that they lost all the fear which his first appearance had given them. The friar was wonderfully taken with him, and used his utmost eloquence and endeavours to convert the devil. The knights stopped drinking to listen to the argument. The men-at-arms forbore brawling, and the wicked little pages crowded round the two strange disputants to hear their edifying discourse. The ghostly man, however, had little chance in the controversy, and certainly little learning to carry it on. Sir Randall interrupted him. "Father Peter," said he, "our kinsman is condemned for ever for want of a single Ave. Wilt thou say it for him?" "Willingly, my lord," said the monk, "with my book." And accordingly he produced his missal to read, without which aid it appeared that the Holy Father could not manage the desired prayer. But the crafty Mercurius had, by his devilish art, inserted a song in the place of the Ave, so that Father Peter, instead of chanting an hymn, sang the following irreverent ditty. Some love the matin chimes which tell the hour of prayer to sinner, but better far's the midday bell which speaks the hour of dinner. For when I see a smoking fish or capon drowned in gravy, or noble haunch on silver dish, full glad I sing my Ave. My pulpit is an alehouse bench whereon I sit so jolly, a smiling rosy country wench, my saint and patron holy. I kiss her cheeks so red and sleek, I press her ringlets wavy, and in her willing ear I speak a most religious Ave. And if I'm blind, yet heaven is kind, and holy saints forgiving, for sure he leads a right good life who thus admires good living. Above they say our flesh is air, our blood celestial ichor. Oh, grant, mid all the changes there, they may not change our liquor. And with this pious wish, the holy confessor tumbled under the table in an agony of devout drunkenness, whilst the knights, the men-at-arms, and the wicked little pages rang out the last verse with the most melodious and emphatic glee. "I'm sorry for Uncle," hiccuped Sir Randall, "that in the matter of the Ave we could not oblige thee in a more orthodox manner, but the Holy Father has failed, and there's not another man in the hall who hath an idea of a prayer." "It's my own fault," said Sir Rollo, "for I hanged the last confessor." And he wished his nephew a surly good night as he prepared to quit the room. "Au revoir, gentlemen," said the devil Mercurius, and at once fixed his tail round the neck of his disappointed companion. The spirit of poor Rollo was sadly cast down. The devil, on the contrary, was in high good humour. He wagged his tail with the most satisfied air in the world, and cut 100 jokes at the expense of his poor associate. On they sped, cleaving swiftly through the cold night winds, frightening the birds that were roosting in the woods and the owls that were watching in the towers. In the twinkling of an eye, as it is known, devils can fly hundreds of miles, that almost the same beat of the clock which left these two in Champagne found them hovering over Paris. They dropped into the court of the Lazarus convent and winded their way through passage and cloister until they reached the door of the prior's cell. Now the prior, Rollo's brother, was a wicked and malignant sorcerer. His time was spent in conjuring devils and doing wicked deeds instead of fasting, scourging, and singing holy psalms. This Mercurius knew, and he therefore was fully at ease at the final result of his wager with poor Sir Roger. "You seem to be well acquainted with the road," said the knight. "I have reason," answered Mercurius, "having for a long period had the acquaintance of his reverence your brother, but you have little chance with him." "And why?" said Sir Rollo. "He's under a bond to my master never to say a prayer, or else his soul and his body are forfeited at once." "Why, thou false and traitorous devil," said the enraged knight, "and thou knewest this when we made our wager?" "Undoubtedly. Do you suppose I would have done so had there been any chance of losing?" And with this they arrived at Father Ignatius's door. "Thy cursed presence threw a spell on my niece and stopped the tongue of my nephew's chaplain. I do believe that had I seen either of them alone, my wager had been won." "Certainly. Therefore I took good care to go with thee. However, thou mayest see the prior alone if thou wilt, and lo, his door is open. I will stand without for 5 minutes, when it will be time to commence our journey." It was the poor baron's last chance, and he entered his brother's room more for the 5 minutes' respite than from any hope of success. Father Ignatius, the prior, was absorbed in magic calculations. He stood in the middle of a circle of skulls with no garment except his long white beard, which reached to his knees. He was waving a silver rod and muttering imprecations in some horrible tongue. But Sir Rollo came forward and interrupted his incantation. "I am," said he, "the shade of thy brother, Roger de Rollo, and have come from pure brotherly love to warn thee of thy fate." "Whence camest thou?" "From the abode of the blessed in paradise," replied Sir Roger, who was inspired with a sudden thought. It was but 5 minutes ago that the patron saint of thy church told me of thy danger and of thy wicked compact with the fiend. Go, said he, to thy miserable brother, and tell him there is but one way by which he may escape from paying the awful forfeit of his bond. And how may that be? Said the prior. The false fiend hath deceived me, and I have given him my soul, but have received no worldly benefit in return. Brother, dear brother, how may I escape? I will tell thee. As soon as I heard the voice of blessed St. Mary Lazarus, the worthy earl had at a pinch coined the name of a saint, I left the clouds where with other angels I was seated, and sped hither to save thee. Thy brother, said the saint, hath but one day more to live, when he will become for all eternity the subject of Satan. If he would escape, he must boldly break his bond by saying an Ave. It's the express condition of the agreement, said the unhappy monk. I must say no prayer, or that instant I become Satan's body and soul. It is the express condition of the saint, answered Roger. Pray, brother, pray, or thou art lost for ever. So the foolish monk knelt down and devoutly sung out an Ave. Amen, said Sir Roger devoutly. Amen, said Mercurius, as suddenly coming behind he seized Ignatius by his long beard and flew up with him to the top of the church steeple. The monk roared and screamed and swore against his brother, but it was of no avail. Sir Roger smiled kindly on him and said, Do not fret, brother, it must have come to this in a year or two. And he flew alongside of Mercurius to the steeple top, but this time the devil had not his tail round his neck. I'll let thee off thy bet, said he to the demon, for he could afford now to be generous. I believe, my lord, said the demon politely, that our ways separate here. Sir Roger sailed gaily upwards, while Mercurius, having bound the miserable monk faster than ever, he sunk downwards to earth and perhaps lower. Ignatius was heard roaring and screaming as the devil dashed him against the iron spikes and buttresses of the church. O thou of all the angels loveliest and most learned, to whom no praise is chanted and no incense burned, Satan, have pity upon me in my deep distress. O Prince of exile, God betrayed by foulest wrong, thou that in vain art vanquished, rising up more strong, Satan, have pity upon me in my deep distress. And thou who knowest all, each weak and shameful thing, kind minister to man in anguish, mighty king, Satan, have pity upon me in my deep distress. Thou that dost teach the leper, the pariah we despise, to love like other men and taste sweet paradise, Satan, have pity upon me in my deep distress. O thou that in the womb of death thy fecund mate engenderest hope with her sweet eyes and her mad gait, Satan, have pity upon me in my deep distress. Thou who upon the scaffold dost give that calm and proud demeanour to the felon who condemns the crowd, Satan, have pity upon me in my deep distress. Thou that hast seen in darkness and canst bring to light the gems a jealous God has hidden from our sight, Satan, have pity upon me in my deep distress. Thou to whom all the secret arsenals are known, where iron, where gold and silver slumber, locked in stone, Satan, have pity upon me in my deep distress. Thou whose broad hand dost hide the precipice from him who barefoot in his sleep walks on the building's rim, Satan, have pity upon me in my deep distress. O thou who makest supple between the horses' feet the bones of the drunkard fallen in the street, Satan, have pity upon me in my deep distress. Thou who best taught the frail and overburdened mind how easily saltpetre and sulphur are combined, Satan, have pity upon me in my deep distress. Thou that hast burned thy brand beyond all help secure into the rich man's brow who tramples on the poor, Satan, have pity upon me in my deep distress. O thou who makest gentle the eyes and hearts of whores with kindness for the wretched, homage for rags and sores, Satan, have pity upon me in my deep distress. Staff of the exile, lamp of the inventor, last priest of the man about whose neck the rope is passed, Satan, have pity upon me in my deep distress. O thou adopted father of those fatherless whom God from Eden thrust in terror and nakedness, Satan, have pity upon me in my deep distress. One Sunday, when the smith was looking around the church, bored with the sermon, in a dimly lit side chapel he spotted a painting of the Last Judgment, and at the bottom he saw there was a magnificent rendering of a demon, a deep oxblood red, with horns, hoofs, and a spiky tail. Why, says he to himself, that would be just the thing for the forge. So he hired an artist and had him paint such a magnificent demon on the door of the forge, and thereafter every day as he entered the forge he touched his cap and greeted the demon with, "Good morning, fellow countryman." Then he proceeded to lay the fire in the furnace and begin his work. Well, the smith and the demon got along well like that for some years. Then, when the smith died, his son succeeded him and took over the business, but he was not disposed to show the same respect to the demon as his father had done. When he went into the forge to start his day's work, he never said good morning to him. Instead, he took the biggest hammer he had in the place and thumped the demon with it 3 times right on the forehead before getting on with his work. And when he left, he would spit in its face. Now, the very embodiment of that painted demon was watching this and felt it was not proper behaviour for someone who earned his living with fire and anvil, and he decided to play a trick on the disrespectful young smith. The next morning, after the smith had banged his hammer on the nose of the demon's portrait and turned to lay the fire, the demon popped up into the forge in the form of a youth. He coughed, and a shower of little sparks flew out of his mouth. The smith turned with a start. "Good day, smith," says he. "I didn't hear you knock," said the smith. "Oh, the door was slightly ajar, and I took the liberty of coming in to see if you might be looking for an apprentice. I could fetch the fuel and blow the bellows so you get on all the faster while I'm learning." "Well, why not?" replied the smith. "What you say is true. If you take care of the simple tasks, I can get on with the actual smithing." So the demon began to learn his trade and carried fuel, fetched water, and pumped the bellows harder than the smith had ever seen anyone do. Before long, he knew more about the smith's work than his master did himself, and the smith was able to leave him in charge of the forge while he went into town to do shopping or visit relatives. One day the smith set his apprentice to work making a gate for a local farmer while he went to market. No sooner had he disappeared around the corner of the street than the Duchess of Dingle came in her carriage. The demon popped his head out and began shouting, step right up, try a new service, we can make old folks into young ones." Out of her carriage jumped the Duchess in a trice and ran into the smithy. "That's quite a claim, young man," she said. "Can you really do it? I would give anything to regain my girlish looks." "Now, would I be advertising such a service if I couldn't deliver the results?" answered the demon. "And how much does it cost?" asked the lady. "Well, seeing as it's a new service, I can offer you a special price. 50 gold pieces, and the reflection you see in the mirror will be the one you saw 50 years ago." "Oh, cheap at half the price to have my youth back," said the old lady, and handed over the coins. The demon took the money and let the lady into the forge. He gave a few pennies to the lady's coachman and asked him to go to the neighbouring farm and fetch 2 buckets of milk. When he got back, before the coachman could stop him, the apprentice had taken a pair of tongs, caught hold of the Duchess by her feet, flung her into the furnace and burnt her up. There was nothing left of her but bare bones, and those were scorched. As the coachman looked on in horror, the demon emptied the milk into a tin bath, collected the bones from the furnace and dropped them into the milk. Bubbles began to rise to the surface. Then the top of a head covered with gold curls appeared, and, as if she were climbing up a ladder, bit by bit, a young lady emerged. The demon handed her a smock, which she pulled on while the astonished coachman covered his eyes. Beep, beep. When she got back home, the Duchess marched straight up to her husband. The Duke of Dingle stared hard at her, then put his glasses on for a better look. Sure, he recognised her from somewhere. "What are you staring at?" said the Duchess. "It's me, you idiot. The smith has set up shop, making people young again. And I've got this nice, smooth body. I don't want an old husband. Get on down there and get yourself done. 50 pieces of gold will take 50 years off your age. Then you'll be fit to have such a young bride on your arm." Well, the old Duke was eager to enjoy his young wife, so he set off to the forge. Meanwhile, the smith was back, and the apprentice was nowhere to be seen. So the smith pumped the bellows and got the furnace hot again, grumbling to himself that young people these days are not to be relied upon. Then up rolled the Duke in his carriage. He jumped down and went into the forge. "Make a young man of me," says he. "Why, sir, what are you talking about? How can one make a young man of you?" "Come now, you did it for the Duchess. Now you have to do it for me, or she won't look twice at me." "Well, I've no idea how to do such a thing." "You lying scoundrel! It was just this morning the Duchess was here." "Well, I wasn't here this morning." It was your apprentice who did the work, and that's the same thing. If he knew how to do it, then surely you, his master, must be an old hand at it. Come now, get on with it, otherwise it'll be the worse for you. I'll have you rubbed down with a birch tree towel." The smith felt there must be a way out here, and had a few private words with the coachman, who, to his surprise, related just how the apprentice had performed that feat that very morning. "Well, if he can do it, then so can I," said the smith to himself. 50 pieces of gold I'm willing to try." So he sensibly got the Duke to put his clothes in a little pile while he prepared the furnace. Then he grabbed him by the legs with the tongs, flung him yelling into the furnace, slammed the door, and began pumping the bellows. Before long there was nothing left of the Duke of Dingle but a pile of cinders, which the smith collected and carefully swept into the bath of milk. He and the coachman waited, smiling and reassuring one another that very soon the Duke would emerge from the milk as good as new, young and handsome. They waited, and they waited. The smith stirred the milk, but all that came to the surface was a dirty grey scum. Now, the Duchess of Dingle's wondering where her husband had got to. She took her white pony from the stable and rode to the forge. The poor smith had to impart the sad news that the Duke showed no signs of coming back. When the Duchess heard that, instead of supplying her with a youthful husband, the smith had only succeeded in producing a bathful of dirty milk, she rushed off to fetch the magistrate to drag him to the gallows. Well, very soon the smith was to be seen marching down the street between 2 constables with his hands tied behind his back. At that moment, the apprentice came whistling up, eating a pie. "Where the taken you, master?" he said. "They're going to hang me," replied the smith, "for burning the Duke of Dingle to a cinder." "Stop!" cried the apprentice to the policeman and the Duchess. "I did it this morning, I can do it again." He ran off to the forge and in no time was back with the Duke looking youthful and handsome, if a little swallowed by his clothes, which were now 3 sizes too big. When the smith had been untied and released, he went back to the forge with his apprentice, who then showed himself in his real form. The smith cowered in fear, but the demon only wanted to make a simple bargain. If the smith promised to show proper respect to him, then they could call it quits. He laid out the 50 gold pieces the Duchess had given him that morning. "They're no use to me where I live," he said. "Now I must bid you goodbye and thank you for your excellent tuition. I'll be making some new exquisite pitchforks with the knowledge I've gained here." And he disappeared in a puff of red smoke accompanied by a little clap of thunder. So the smith ordered a very smart gold leaf frame for the painting on the forge door, and from then on he always doffed his cap and said a very polite good morning as he entered the forge. Sometimes, just to keep him on his toes, the painting winked back. And the Duke and Duchess of Dingle packed up their portmanteaus and sailed around the world on a second honeymoon.